In the last tutorial where I left off, we downloaded the J connector and we configured the class path so that we could access MySQL. And now the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually start MySQL. We're going to set up the database. So a handy thing to do at this point actually is to make a link on your desktop to MySQL. This is easy enough to do if you right-click on the link to start MySQL. If you go to Send To, and you click on that, one of our choices should be create a desktop icon. Now whenever I want to start MySQL, I can just double-click on this. So let's go ahead and double-click on this. And I'm going to type here our password of student. That gets us in. And now let's refer back to our notes. We're going to set up a very simple database here. I have some commands here that I'd like to go through with you. Let me zoom in on this so that you can see a little bit better at home what's going on. So one command that's a SQL command is show databases. So I can highlight this in the notes and I can go back to my screen, right click, I can choose paste, and hit return, and this shows all the databases that I have on my machine right now. If you had on your machine a database called MyAddressBook 4, this is going to remove it. If it isn't, it won't hurt anything. So let me go ahead and paste this in here. So it says, is MyAddressBook 4 database on this machine on MySQL already? I hit return, and nothing really happened there because it wasn't there before. But if I needed to get rid of it, if I needed to redo it, I would use that. You may well have to in this assignment. So the next thing I want to do is let's create the database where it never existed before. And instead of going back and forth, let me just move this over here and this over here. So the next thing I want to do after creating the database, according to the notes, is I want to show it just to confirm that it's there. The step isn't completely necessary, but it does kind of make you feel a little bit better if you can see that it's there. I can now see it exists. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to say that I want to use that database. That kind of locks me into it. So now we're going to use that database. And in using that database, I need to copy this next line of code all the way down to the bottom. And I'm going to paste it into here. It's one continuous line all the way to the semicolon. And what we're doing here is we're creating a table within that database, which is called phone list table. And it's going to consist of an ID number, which is never allowed to be null. It's going to auto increment. That means the first one in there is going to be 1, the next one's going to be in there 2, the next one's going to be 3. It will be my primary key ID, so all of that refers to that number. And then the very next column over is going to consist of last name, which is going to be a varchar. That means basically a string consisting of 255 characters. We'll also have a column which is called first for first name, and phone number, and that'll be our last column. So we're really going to have 4 columns in this table. Let's hit return here. That's all created. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'll put some values in there. So let me copy this next line here, this insert. Insert puts information into our database. So specifically for last, first, and phone, I'm going to put in the values Krumm, Jim, and this phone number that I've got here. And these have to be in semicolons. or in apostrophes separated with commas, and you'll notice that the last value does not have a comma after it. Always with all SQL commands we end the line with a semicolon, or you're going to have issues. So that looks like that went okay, and let's do that for the rest of this information. So now we're going to put in Austin Powers. And now we'll put in Tom Slick. And of course you can type this by hand and invent whoever you want to put in here yourself. I'm doing this because I'm just trying to avoid mistakes, and also it makes it a little bit easier to follow it at home. And again, all of this is in your notes. This is the last value that I'm going to enter. Let's go ahead again now, say show tables. And it shows that we have this phone list table that we just created. And now if I want to see what's in there, I can paste in this next line which says select star from phone list table, and it should give me everything in that table that I just created. And there you go. Here's our information. We can see that it's all working. Now at this particular point we have completed making our database, so we can go ahead and type exit. And the next thing we need to do is we need to set up the ODBC on Windows. So to do that, I'm going to start up Explorer. You can do the same thing from a window if you have another version of Windows. And I'm going to navigate to the Windows directory. And I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to do a search. Of course this is a little bit different depending on the version of Windows that you have. And specifically what I'm looking for is ODBC 32.exe. So let me just paste that in here. I'm going to hit return. Now this is going to take a while. There's a good number of these on your computer, and what we've discovered is not all of these are the same. There may be only one which may work with MySQL. So you may have to open up several of these to see which ones work. And what we found is the very first ones tend not to work. So I think I'm going to go with this last one here, and we'll see pretty quickly if it works. Now, it might be a good idea if you right click on this and send it to your desktop as a link. And if this isn't a good one, we'll just remove it later. So here's the link that I just made, and I'll double click on it. And you want to click on the System tab here, and you want to be looking for, actually I have several databases here, but you want to click on Add once you're at System. And one of the choices that we're looking for is MySQL. And I'll go ahead and select the MySQL ODBC 5.1 driver. Again, this may be different than your version if you get an updated one in the future. And I'll click Finish. And when I get to this screen, this is really important. You want to carefully look at your notes to make sure that you do this exactly as I have it in your notes. This takes you to this screen. And I'm going to make this look exactly like I have over here. I've created a database in MySQL which is called My Address Book 4. And I'm going to say that the user is root. And I'm going to type in the password student. And now when I click the down arrow, if all goes right, you should see My Address Book 4. If you wish, you can even test it. It says that we are talking to it right now, and you want to click OK. And then here you can go ahead and click OK. I see that I have My Address Book 4 here. That looks really good, so I'll say OK. Now, that gets us to here in the notes, and this is where we're actually making the program. So I want you to copy everything that we have here in this program from beginning to end. Let's get it in the buffer. Let's make sure we have that last closing brace there. And I've already started MySQL. I do have to have the correct name for this program. So I see here my program is called, maybe it's more important I copy the name right now to make sure I get it exactly right. Address book MySQL, spelled exactly like that. It's case sensitive, so be very careful. And I'll paste that name in here just like that, and I'll say, yep, this is going to be my new project. Now, I need to create here a new class, and it will have exactly the same name. And now, going back to my notes, now it's important that we highlight the whole program. Beginning to end, and let's just paste it into here. Let's make sure we click Finish. And now I'm going to hit Control A, which selects everything, and Control V, which pastes this into here. Looking over to the right, I can see that this program looks like it's going to compile. So I'll go ahead and click Run. And I can see that I've actually just hooked up to my database. Now, looking at my notes, I can actually test it here. If I go up to that MySQL database that I just created, I put these people in here, and I see that I'm in here. So if I say that I have a last name of Krumm and Jim, if I say find me, bingo, you can see it found me and actually put in my phone number here. Now, looking at this assignment that you guys are about to do for databases, let's go ahead and get into Moodle. This will take just a minute. Let's look at the instructions, because the main gist of what you're doing here is you are adding additional fields. All you have to do is just add like address, and city, and state. That's kind of the gist of it. So this program is complete all the way down to the phone number. What you're really doing is you are going to expand this program to include some things right now that it doesn't have. And specifically, we want it to also keep track of address, city, state, zip, and email. So in this working program we have right now, you're going to have to add text boxes to do this and to label these. And then to these respective commands here, you're going to have to add additional code. So one thing I want to point out in the code, if we go here in Eclipse, just a few things. If you set up another database, which is probably a pretty good idea, and you might want to call it My Address Book 5, which is the complete version, you want to fill in those additional fields, which means back when you set up your address book here, you're going to have last, first, phone, and then comma, address, city, state, and so on. So you're going to have to insert that after creating the table that allows you to do that. So here is where we created the table. We said first, phone, etc., last. You're going to have address, city, state after this. You can go with the same name for the table if you wish, but definitely create a new database for this new database, maybe called Address Book 5. It is absolutely imperative that you name your address with its various tables and columns that you're going to have in it exactly as I've given you within the assignment, or I won't be able to test your program. So make sure it's set up exactly like this. Now, if you want to modify which program you're hooking up to, you're going to have to modify the ODBC to ODBC 32 as we did in Windows to accept My Address Book 5 instead of My Address Book 4. You'll have to adjust it within your code. The rest should be pretty much the same. The next action is going to happen actually on your buttons where we collect the information. So you're going to collect information on first and last, and phone if you're going to do an insert, as well as those other fields of address, city, state. And then you're going to insert it into the phone list table, as I say here. Now, one thing I want to point out is that you've got to have quotes here. We're concatenating onto here last, first, phone. There's a comma that separates each of these. And then it's really, really hard to see here. Let me photocopy this and open up Notepad so that you can see this. It's very, very tiny. But it looks like you have 3 quotes here. And in reality, what you have is you have a single quote and a double quote. That single quote is really important. A single quote will always come inside of each of your double quotes or to the outside. In other words, I have a single quote here on the inside. I have a double quote and then a single quote here to close off last name. So a single quote always goes before a double quote if you're closing off a statement, or just after a double quote if you're opening up another statement. And then each new field must be separated with a comma. So if you look at this, you can see, for instance, that this says single quote, double quote, single quote, comma, single quote, double quote, plus, and so on. And this is going to be true of all the commands I've got down here. And then in addition, we only went to phone here. Why? You're going to have to add address, city, state here, just as we've listed out first and last. Just be aware that at the end of this, you don't have a comma on your last field. So you're going to be doing this. You're going to be expanding the select statements, the insert statements, even the delete statements that I've got here. Pay special attention to those double quotes and single quotes. Good luck to you in creating this assignment. I wish you the best. If you need some help, please let me know. This concludes this tutorial.